Take a look at these pictures. Savor them. Why? Because this is historic. While it may surprise you, this is the first time we are seeing Pluto up close.
This event will be one of those historic moments in the 21st century.
NASA's New Horizons spacecraft is giving us a look at a world at the edge of the solar system, so far away, 4.5 billion kilometers. Even the most powerful telescopes were hard-pressed to see it, and virtually nothing is known about it.
So is what we know about Pluto more an educated guess than it is science?
At the beginning of the mission, we would say that you could put everything we know about Pluto on a 3x5 card, maybe 2. Well, I think it's a full sheet of paper now.
This spacecraft is destined to make a successful flight over a ballistic flight path.
Now, before you can tell this story or write this chapter in exploration, you have to go back half a century. In the 1960s, NASA began a grand tour of the solar system, sending spacecraft to visit every planet, except one, Pluto. Pluto, you can argue, never got much respect. In fact, it's not even a full-fledged planet anymore, rather a dwarf planet. Time after time, missions were proposed, but, pardon the pun, never got off the ground. Alan Stern, New Horizons lead scientist.
I used to say if a Pluto mission was a cat, it had been dead long ago because they only get 9 lives.
But Stern, like a dog with a bone, wouldn't give it up. In the early 1990s, he was part of a group calling itself the Pluto Underground, pushing and prodding anyone who would listen. They finally did, and Stern got his mission.
Three, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff of NASA's New Horizons spacecraft.
New Horizons launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida in 2006. It has taken more than 9 years crossing the void of space to reach its destination, and that's traveling at more than 50,000 kilometers an hour, the fastest spacecraft ever, says New Horizons program manager Glenn Fountain.
That speed had us cross the orbit of the moon in 9 hours from launch. The Apollo astronauts took 3 days.
A small team of scientists and engineers has been keeping track of New Horizons ever since liftoff.
We're set up for some pretty spectacular discoveries.
Alice Bowman, Mission Operations Manager, works here. This dimly lit, cramped room filled with monitors is mission control at the Applied Physics Lab in Laurel, Maryland.
This burn that we just had was perfect. And so we're hoping that this is the last burn, that we don't have to do any more, that we're right on target for Pluto flyby.
For Bowman, this has been a long journey.
And you realize that your children have grown up during, you working on this mission. You've had, life events over the course of just being on one project.
We have a nominal wake-up of the New Horizons spacecraft on our way to Pluto.
Now, after waiting a decade, there will finally be closure. As New Horizons hurtles towards Pluto, anticipation grows. There is a buzz, but for Bowman and the team, they still can't exhale.
During this period, we have so many eyes on us, and they're saying this is an historic mission. Yeah. And it's a little overwhelming to have all that attention.
Without exception, there have been surprises every time a spacecraft has visited a new world: Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the rest. The science team says that because so little is known about Pluto, nearly everything will be a surprise.
Pluto, scientists say, is yet another piece to the puzzle of how the solar system was formed.
This is wide open, raw exploration. You might almost call it taking candy from a baby, because there's so much science that you can skim off the top. I like to say, this isn't your typical space mission of today where we're going to rewrite the textbooks. In this case, we're writing it from scratch.
New Horizons won't go into orbit around Pluto, but rather fly by it. The spacecraft will be about 12,000 kilometers above the planet. How good a look will that be? Well, picture it flying over New York City at that altitude.
It would not only be able to see the boroughs of New York, but in Manhattan you can see Central Park and count the ponds in Central Park.
New Horizons is the capstone, completing the planetary survey NASA began half a century ago. Completely by chance, Mariner 4 flew by and took the first pictures of Mars from a spacecraft on that same date 50 years ago, July 14th, 1965. Scientists say so much data will be collected from New Horizons that it will take 16 months for all of it to be transmitted back to Earth.
So, what do you do for an encore? What's next? How about Jupiter's moon Europa? It turns out you might be more likely to find life there than on Mars.
Mars was always the golden child for exploration. It beckoned us because at one time in its history it was likely very much like Earth, a place where life could have taken hold, a place where water ran on the surface. But what about now? If you're looking for a spot where life in our solar system might exist today, scientists believe it's Europa. A frozen surface covered in a layer of ice seems a ridiculous place to go looking, a place so different from Earth. But beneath that ice is an ocean of liquid water, and there, life in some form may exist. John Grunsfeld is NASA's Associate Administrator for Science Missions.
Because of our study of extreme life on Earth, we now realize that the environments, for instance, a warm, salty ocean under the ice of the surface of Europa could be a similar environment to the way microbes live on Earth. But it could also be the home for life that doesn't look like life on Earth.
By the mid-2020s, a spacecraft may be heading to Europa, searching for evidence that life exists in a place NASA calls the alien ocean.
This is the first time in human history we have the capability to do that. We have the capability to build a mission to Europa to look for signs of life. And so now we have the capability. It's a much more exciting question.
How close do you think we are to finding life in the universe?
I think within the next 20 years we'll have a lot of capability to detect life if it's there, and then it's a question of how lucky do we get.
The icy moon Europa and the secrets it holds are for another day. Now is Pluto's time. Time to reveal the secrets it's held tight. Time to let us see it up close.
We're going to be able to piece together, I hope, the history, the evolutionary history of 4.5 billion years of solar system evolution that's going to help us answer the question of, where did we come from? Where did the Earth come from?
This tiny dwarf planet is finally getting some respect.